Hi everyone, so we're still stuck in self-isolation, which does mean that I get the time to finally work on projects that I've been putting aside for months, if not years. So I got this blanket quite a long time ago and it is really nice and soft, but I don't really use it. The fabric itself is really nice because one side it's this nice satin and the other side it is a shot, which just means that it has this iridescent light shifting capability. It's finally time to give it a new life, so I thought I might turn it into a jacket. And if there's any leftover fabric, I might squeeze out some shorts or a skirt, but we'll see how that goes. I thought I'd just go through how I cut out and sew a garment, because I haven't really done that. You've seen a lot of the garments that I make, but I haven't really gone through the actual construction process of it. It does help to have a pattern, I'll tell you that. All of the materials used are from my sewing stash at home, so don't fight me if the colours aren't perfectly matched, because they're not. And it also won't be lined because the fabric on both sides is quite pretty anyway, and I don't have any fabric that would match. It's gonna be a pretty basic build, so I can probably bling it up afterwards maybe. We'll just see how we go. Anyway, let's get started. The pattern I'm using for the jacket is something that I have used for a previous project. The jacket pattern itself is very similar to the one that I drafted for the lace monarch bomber jacket that was part of my bridal collection last year. The only main difference between the lace jacket and this one is that the old jacket had a lace placket cuff, whereas this one is just ribbing, which is a lot easier to sew. I had just enough fabric at the end to make a full pair of pants, but I didn't have a pattern on hand to use for it. So I ended up just cutting out the pants from a pants block that I usually use and then just added a bit extra for the seam allowance. Here are all of the pieces laid out for the jacket specifically. The zippers have been in my stash for a long time now, so it's a really good opportunity to finally use them. The pocket fabric was from a scrap that was used to make the bomber jacket from my first mini collection ever, and it is in a similar colour, which is a huge plus. This adorable little patch was purchased while on my last trip to Japan. I am admittedly a patch hoarder, and I thought this would go well with the quilted fabric to add a more spacey extraterrestrial vibe to it. Before doing anything else, I just wanted to sew on the patch to the front left side of the jacket. I always recommend sewing patches on instead of just ironing them, since the sticky back material isn't really designed to stay on long term anyway. And then as I'm sewing this, the little rhinestone just pops straight off the patch. After searching the floor for a good few minutes, I finally found it and glued it back on. It's a great start to the project, but this could be easily avoided with just using a smaller machine foot. While the glue was drying on the patch, I started by sewing up the sleeve seams and the neck facings. You have to really ease the quilted fabric in slowly to stop it from wiggling around. Later on you'll see me swap from a standard machine foot to a Teflon foot, which helped immensely. I like to sew with a 1cm seam allowance, as it is the general industry standard and just leaves less bulk in the seam. With the pieces that were still bulky and messy on the raw edge, I overlocked the edges to flatten them down, as I will be binding them next. Before this, I edge stitched the seams of the neck facing down so they would sit flatter across the shoulder. I want to use as much as the original blanket as possible for this look, so I unpicked the satin binding all around the edge of the original blanket and added it to the jacket. To the best of my ability, I began the task of binding the edge of the neck facing and sleeve seams. Satin is always known to be a very slippery fabric, so you just have to handle it with patience and check often that it is feeding into the machine properly. And I will say here that I do use an industrial machine to sew. I just find it more comfortable than domestic machines, and I have worked at a job where you required more experience on an industrial machine anyway. The major downside to them is that they take up a lot of space. Of course you can do the same sewing techniques on a domestic machine, so long as you understand the machine and how it works for you. Since the satin binding doesn't really work the same as bias binding, I just really had to work it through and make sure that it would sit flat enough on the fabric. But once it was done, it looked pretty cute and was definitely an improvement over the more boring overlocking style. When making pockets, whether it be jetted or zipper openings, I like to add a pocket facing. It just makes it feel a little more polished. All I do here is overlock one edge of the facing and edge stitch the entire piece to the back panel of the pocket bag. When you open the zip, all you will see is the quilted fabric peeking through instead of the pocket fabric. Now it was just a case of inserting the pocket. I don't know if my improvised method is the best method out there. I just do it similar to a jetted pocket, just without the jet, so sewing the pocket bag to the outside with the rectangle being the size of the zipper. What I will do is link a tutorial in the description by another YouTuber of a very similar process I found, which you can watch if you're interested in learning this for yourself, as they do a much better job of explaining than I do. Here I'm just switching to a narrow Teflon foot to edge stitch the zipper to the opening. The zip itself needs to be snug, but not too tight that it will bulge out and warp the shape of the garment. Then I'm just sewing the pocket bags together. I also found the edges to prevent it from fraying as I was wearing it. And now the pockets are complete. Yay! So now we're starting to see the jacket come together. I sewed and bound the side seams together. I also did the shoulder seams at the same time. The fabric on the inside looks really shiny on this camera. Next it was time to insert the front zipper. Before doing anything else, the neckband needs to be tacked on first and the lower body band. The band itself is made from the ribbing, but there are also these two rectangular bearers on each side of the zip, which just help add a little bit more structure. I also bagged out the sleeve cuffs at the same time just to help us save a few minutes later on. The bearer and body band strip was attached to the waist on the outer edge, so leaving the inside edge raw for later on. This part was a little improvised, so it's probably not the ideal approach, but here I just sewed the neck facing to the bearers only, leaving the rest to be attached to the zipper later. I attached the front zip to the outer right side only, leaving the facings loose for the meantime. Because I like living life on the edge, I just pinned and sewed it on instead of just checking if it lined up, which is kind of important. And fortunately, I am actually pretty happy with how it turned out. It was just a case of sewing up one side, then doing the other side, making sure not to pull the fabric or make it bubble and warp. After the zip was in, I attached the facings to the zip by re-sewing around the zipper edge and the neckline. The best way I can describe it is that the zipper is in the middle of this fabric sandwich. Especially around the neckline area, you need to go slow and just check everything has been caught in correctly. I am far from perfect with this step, but improvement just comes from practice. Once everything was sitting correctly, I understitched around the neckline of the neck facing to help it sit better, which made a big difference, especially since this fabric is so squishy. I also took this opportunity to top stitch the zipper opening down to help it sit better. Now that the zip and neck are all completed, it was just a case of closing the ribbing opening on the body hem. Usually I would conceal this part when bagging up the lining of the jacket, but since this had no lining, I kinda had to improvise. Then it was just adding the cuffs to the sleeves that I had prepared earlier. I didn't bind this part of the jacket, mostly because of how finicky it is to get this kind of satin binding on such a small area, so it was just overlocked. And now we get to finally add the sleeves to the jacket itself. This step really helps the dream come to reality, as the jacket sits a lot differently when the sleeves are in place. And here is where I wanted to glam it up a bit. The ribbing I used was really flimsy and cheap and was kind of bringing the look down a bit. So using a lot of sequins and beads, I hand stitched dozens and dozens of them to the ribbing across the body and neckband. My plan was that I was trying to direct attention more to the little embellishments rather than the ribbing itself. And now that the jacket is done, it is time to make the pants. They are a pretty simple construction with the front and back pieces and then some pockets which were quite crudely cut from scraps of the blanket. I added the pockets in probably one of the simplest ways you can do this step. Just sewing a rectangle in one piece on the front side seam, then clipping it and turning it through. Understitching really helps keep everything in place. The pocket bags and the pants themselves were only sewn and overlocked with no binding, as I had run out of binding by this time. Now that the pockets are done, it is just a case of sewing the front and back seams together, and the side seams, which is where we start to see the shape of the pants finally come together. And at the same time, I tacked the original care label for the blanket onto the pants. It just helps give a reminder of what this outfit used to be before the transformation. Adding the leg cuffs is pretty much the same as the sleeve cuffs, just sewn and overlocked. The ribbing is smaller than the leg width as it will stretch to fit the shape of the main fabric and help gather everything together. The waistband is pretty much the same process too, with the addition of some elastic in the middle of the ribbing. The elastic is loose on the inside, but I tacked it down later to prevent it from twisting when it is washed. Hello, here I am again a few weeks later. Whoops. Time is definitely a surreal blur right now while being stuck at home with nowhere to be, but here is the final outfit and I actually really like it. It is really comfy and warm, just like wearing a sleeping bag. I feel like I am either part of a 90s girl band or an off-brand version of Space Channel 5. It actually fits pretty well considering I had to squash everything down quite a lot in order to make it fit to cut it all out. The only issue is that the pants waist is a little bit tight because there is no fly, so I have to wiggle a bit to get it on. The sleeves themselves are definitely a little bit short as well, but honestly everything is always too short on me, so it's no surprise there. But it is still very wearable and I'm excited to wear it out, probably only to the supermarket because it's the only place we're allowed to go right now. Once again, stay safe everyone. And thank you for 500 subs too. I really do appreciate the support, especially in such a strange time as this. I have been stockpiling content for the blog too, but because a lot of that is linked to making videos as well, it's kind of just being put on pause until I am allowed out to get the materials and supplies I need in order to make those videos and posts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful day and I will see you later. Bye!